The Elements of Friendship, Book 1, Harmony, by Aramis Fegelin. Chapter 7, Laughing at Tartarus.
I must say, this has been quite the eventful return to Ponyville.
Verity sighed.
I must agree,
The mayor said, looking up to the sky.
Is it still night time? Is the sun due to rise in a few hours?
Twilight and her companions each rubbed a foreleg nervously. Even Spike.
Well, about that,
Twilight began.
We need to write a book,
Pinkie piped up.
And that book is going to have some secret code inside of it that's going to help us fix the elements of harmony so we can save the thing!
She finished with a cheeky grin at the villagers, the bulk of whom only chuckled lightly at her statement. Yeah, and it's a real page-turner, Rainbow Dash added sarcastically.
Are you kidding?
Twilight said fiercely.
Studies of Ponyville culture is notorious in the literary community for the horrendous backorder time due to its being published by the Masquerade Foundation independently. Any pony would be lucky to get their hands on an unabridged copy of it.
Twilight, interjected Applejack. If this book is so dang important, why didn't Celestia have the unabridged copy with that there code you found? Twilight scratched her chin, putting on her metaphorical thinking bridle.
Maybe Queen Celestia didn't want the book and the code to be too close together, in case they got compromised. That does make sense,
nodded Rarity. But we don't have time to wait for a backorder, Twilight said in a determined voice. We have to go to the Crystal Mountains post-haste, find that book, decipher the code, and... The path toward the downfall on the Nightmare Moon stretched out in front of Twilight. It was a very long, and getting longer with each step she took. Her forelegs gave out from under her, hooves at the top of her head.
Oh, Queen Celestia, when is this going to end? Once I get to the Crystal Mountains, the cipher will just lead to another clue, and that will lead to another clue, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. Atwa!
Applejack said sharply, causing Twilight to look up. Applejack's freckled muzzle creased in a smile. We all know that it's going to be a long road till we bring back the sun, but that don't mean we gotta stop and gawk at how long the road is ahead of us. Queen Celestia's depended on us to put an end to this eternal night, and if I didn't help you see this through to the end, I'll never forgive myself.
Yeah,
Rainbow Dash put in.
It might take a while, but I didn't become an awesome flyer overnight, and I don't pretend that I did.
I don't want to get in your way,
Fireside said quietly.
but I feel just awful if I couldn't help you out if I can.
It would be remiss of me to leave your party now,
Rarity said simply.
And speaking of parties,
Piggy squeaked as he bounced around the group.
You're going to need some laughs to clean up and keep your chin up.
She produced a party favor from out of nowhere and blew it in Twilight's face. The party favor tickled Twilight's nose, forcing a small giggle from out of her.
And I'm always here for you too, Twilight,
Spike said finally, pointing a claw at his chest importantly. Smiling down at her ward, Twilight pulled him in with a hoof and nuzzled him.
See what I mean, Twilight?
Applejack said brightly, one foreleg crossed in front of the other. We're with you, through thick or thin. Twilight looked up from Spike, her host still resting around his shoulders.
Thank you, girls,
she said, and she meant it. Even if these girls could be utterly infuriating at times, they still went with her into the very heart of Canterlot, or Endymion now, rather, and still wished to travel with her to the end. It meant more to Twilight than she would otherwise let on.
Well,
Rainbow Dash said abruptly, clapping her foothills together,
now that we're back at Ponyville, I think I'm going to pull up a nice bit of cumulonimbus and cast some Z's.
And with that, she bolted up into the sky, coming down moments later with a small cloud, which she wasted no time alighting on.
Well, I ordinarily would be loath to be on the same side of Rainbow Dash in the trading of words. I have to agree with her,
said Rarity.
After all that had befell us at Canterlot, I say we deserve a small bit of rest.
Canterlot. Crescent rose. A rock fell into Twilight's chest. She had nearly forgotten the friend she had made up at Canterlot less than an hour before. Crescent Rose had given everything to make sure that they had gotten out of Canterlot alive. And now, Twilight brushed away a tear. Crescent Rose did a great service to Equestria, but we can't let her sacrifice be in vain. We have to make absolutely certain that we're prepared for the long haul. It pains me to say this, but we can't be saddled with grief at her loss. We'll have to press on.
Crescent Rose? The mayor asked. Who's that?
A good friend. With the help of Spike and her 5 mare companions, Twilight gave a brief summary of what unfolded from the moment they left Ponyville to the moment they winked out back to its boundaries. The mayor scratched her chin thoughtfully for a moment, before bowing her head.
My deep condolences to Crescent Rose's family, wherever they may be. You have raised a fine daughter who fought for what she felt was right, at great personal cost. May your memory be honored long after by those who you saved.
Even though it was a token political eulogy, Twilight still bowed her head, as did every pony in town square. She felt her grief for Crescent Rose ebbing away into heightened resolve. Even though many lives were threatened just by the sun never rising, the fact that Nightmare Moon had outright ended a life directly felt that much stronger to Twilight. This nightmare would need to be put down, miasma dispelled, and the Queen of the Night brought to her senses.
How long do you intend to remain in Ponyville before departing again?
The mayor asked.
No more than 2 days, replied Twilight.
What? 2 days? Rainbow Dash sat bolt upright on her cloud. That's only like 4 dozen hours!
Yes, and we'll need to prepare as much as we can. I'll need to chart the easiest and yet most discreet route to the Crystal Mountains as I can. And the rest of you, does any pony have a radio?
A radio? Applejack echoed. My family has one, but I reckon they'll need to hear about the goings-on around Equestria. Besides, those things are the size of 3 bread loaves stacked on top of one another. I don't think we'd be able to fit one in the saddlebag.
Oh!
Pinkie started to jump into the air frantically, waving a hoof back and forth.
I have a radio I could bring.
2 days passed in a blur, with the party of 7 resting intermittently, trying to maintain their diurnal schedule as well as they could. Twilight's heliogenesis spell could only output so much light, and the sunrise was barely brighter than the moon. Twilight had little time to acquaint herself with many more ponies in Ponyville as she used the library's maps of Equestria to determine a path to the Crystal Mountains that followed little-used roads. She had conceded to some interaction, though, at the request of Applejack and Rarity. A major distraction, though, almost prevented Twilight from inspecting the maps of Equestria. Pinkie Pie had presented her radio.
This is a radio?
Twilight poked at the small thing sitting on Golden Oak Library's table, barely as large as a horseshoe. Don't look like no radio I've ever seen, Applejack muttered. Indeed, the radio was made out of various candy materials. The radio's casing was made from a jawbreaker. Gumdrops substituted dials. A candy cane took the place of antenna, and crisscrossed bits of licorice formed a speaker.
And it's got cotton candy wiring on the inside as well,
Pinkie added. Looks tasty, mused Spike, licking his chops. A pink cough came between Spike and the candy radio.
You might not want to do that. Just a faintest little lick, and the whole thing will go kabling!
Fireworks sparkles seemed to emanate from Pinkie Pie as he reared up at the shout. Then she beamed wildly.
So, don't actually do it. I had to go through 5 candy radios before I figured that out.
Twilight screwed up her face and thought, perplexed as to how something like this would function. But how does it work? I mean, I doubt that cotton candy is very thermorealistically conductive.
It would be nice to listen to some music right about now,
Verity mused.
Okie dokie dokie!
Pinkie said brightly, taking one of the gummies in her teeth and twisting it around. A high, warbling buzz filled the air. 5 pairs of ears flattened against 5 skulls, and Spike clenched his claws over the sides of his head. Husband and wife law firm, cease and desist, have forced to file suit against Nightmare Moon for damages resulting from her everlasting night.
Noted entrepreneur entertainment Ready Creek has insisted that Nighttime Eternal has not interrupted the timetable for his plans to open a resort in strange lightning bolts that radiate the light and heat of the sun all across the country. After several intersped stories from numerous radio stations broadcast from all around Equestria, bridged by high stealing static, Pinkie settled on a low, soothing cello piece. At once, the tension dissipated as the music settled in through their ears and calmed their minds. It brought to mind sunny fields and warm days. Even Rainbow Dash, who ordinarily would not be caught dead listening to classical music of any sort, felt as if some pony had somehow transformed honey into sound. As the cello performance concluded, a boisterous voice belted out from the radio. And that was Ode to a Summer Breeze, accompanied by my very special sun pony, Octavia Melody.
Oh, final!
Shouted a Cyrus Mare's voice. Pinkie gasped.
Is that my cousin Tommy?
She squeaked.
What? I'm just telling it like it is, Octy,
replied the pony named Vinyl on the radio.
It is Tommy!
Pinkie squealed, bouncing about the library in mirth.
My famous cello-playing cousin is on the radio, and I tuned to her!
Wait, you're cousins with Octavia Melody? I must say, the family resemblance is rather lacking, Verity added. Twilight nodded in agreement. Rainbow Dash sussed him loudly. Vinyl and Octavia were wrapping up on their on-air bickering and returning to their script.
We're sorry to say this, but our safe house has become compromised due to circumstances outside our control. As such, the next broadcast of 3 Dreams with a DJ will be indefinitely postponed. And until next time, keep those styles spinning and those smiles shining.
The sounds of record scratching segued into empty static. A resistance radio show, Twilight breathed.
Well, that takes a blank heap of courage to do what they're doing,
Applejack commented.
And my cousin Tommy is doing it too,
said Pinkie giddily as he bounced into the air, floating a little with each hop. How can you be related to Octavia Medley? Twilight asked in a flabbergasted tone. Pinkie stopped in midair, slowly hovering down.
Well, my mom and her mom are sisters, but that's not what I meant,
Twilight hissed. How can you, some pony who couldn't take anything seriously if her life depended on it, possibly be related to Octavia Medley, one of the most steadfast and proper ponies this side of San Palermo? Pinkie just tried.
I don't know. We just are. But seriously, Twilight, you gotta stop being serious all the time. You gotta laugh and giggle and smile, smile, smile. And your soldiers will be all stiff and grumpy all the time, and you're gonna be a grumpy, wumpy, saddy kid because of that. You're gonna be all sad and grumpy, even when your shoulders are all achy. And every pony around you is gonna be sad because you're grumpy, and every pony they know is gonna be so sad because of that. And okay, I get it! Twilight barked, her ears growing flat. You don't want people to be sad because you're a clown. I get it! Pinkie blinked in confusion at Twilight. Rainbow Dash folded her forelegs in disapproval.
Twilight, she's not a clown. She's a party planner,
the Pegasus said sharply.
For such a smart pony, you sure are stupid.
I just love to see ponies being happy, Twilight,
Pinkie said, holding her forelegs wide as she stood up on her hind legs with a broad smile.
I make parties and stuff to make other ponies super happy all the time.
Besides, clowns are creepy, Rainbow Dash said. Pinkie Pie is just weird.
At Rarity's insistence, Twilight joined her and Fluttershy for a visit to the Ponyville Spa, run by a pair of twins, Aloe and Lotus Blossom. Though the building looked too small to contain any kind of facilities for rest and relaxation, a staircase down to an expanded subterranean level revealed a much larger facility than Twilight could have guessed. After a treatment package that Rarity had put on her own tab, insistently, Twilight felt completely rejuvenated, as though she could take on a dozen nightmare moons on her own. The time came to leave, though, and the journey would not be easy. We will have to loop around the North Equest Mountains, so that we can travel as close to straight north as we can, Twilight explained,
remained tied back into a queue. This served the dual purpose of keeping her mane from dripping sweat onto the mats she poured over, and preparing for the long journey ahead. The path I marked out keeps alongside the road, but it'll involve traveling wide around any towns we cross. We can't chance the notion that Nightmare Moon hasn't deployed her Nightmare Guard to each and every settlement. It should take us a few weeks of steady pace to reach the Crystal Mountains. A few weeks?! Rainbow Dash interjected. The North Equus mountain range is 24 gross miles south of Crystal Mountains. If we maintain a steady travel time of about a gross mile a day, it should take us about 24 days to reach the Crystal Mountains. A gross miles? Echoed Applejack. That don't sound like it's a big thing.
Not a big thing, Verity said in astonishment. But 1 gross of miles in 1 day, it's like...
A day is 24 hours long, and ponies usually sleep 6 hours, right? Twilight explained. If we maintain a good cantering speed of about 10 miles per hour, we should cover about that distance in 24.5 hours, taking a breather for the remainder of the day.
But what about eating?
Fluttershy asked.
We'll just help ourselves to the grass on the ground on this track.
Grass!
Verity gasped.
But grass is just so...
Do forgive me, Twilight. I still plan on accompanying you, but I cannot lightly set aside my refined lifestyle.
Grass isn't exactly my favorite either, Rarity, but we just have to make do, Twilight said shortly.
There might even be some dandelions out there. They're always so tickly when I eat them,
Pinkie said gleefully, balancing on her forehooves and hoisting her hind legs into the air. Or maybe some pansies, Rainbow Dash said eagerly.
Or daisies,
Fluttershy asked. The conversation continued in this vein for at least a minute before Twilight called their attention back to the task at hoof. We're not going out there to look for our favorite flowers. We're heading off to the Crystal Mountains to find studies of Ponyville culture.
Hey, who says we can't have a little bit of fun on the way?
Rainbow Dash smirked.
This isn't about having fun!
The 6 others around the library table froze up, each giving Twilight an odd look. Her ears involuntarily drooped. She felt the tension mounting in the air.
Twilight, darling,
Verity began slowly.
We are all of us very aware of the high stakes of this endeavor, but I would really hope that this is not a humorous venture.
Yeah, Spike set up with balled up claws. What Rarity said! Twilight suppressed the urge to roll her eyes at Spike's attempts to endear himself to Rarity, and addressed her fellow unicorn directly.
But, Nightmare Moon, we can't pretend that this isn't a big deal!
None of us is saying it ain't, Applejack said, slightly crossed. But any pony's gotta laugh at some point, or she's just gonna be up a creek without a paddle.
Tell me about it,
Rainbow Dash said, while she made a circle or two around the table.
I know that joining the Wonderbolts ain't gonna happen in a day, but I've learned to joke about it with myself.
Twilight arched an eyebrow at the Cyan Pegasus.
But I thought that getting into the Wonderbolts was, like, serious business for you. Why would you joke about it?
Because it makes getting things done seem more fun,
Pinkie said from her hostess on Twilight's back. Twilight did not find herself buckling under the pink-earth pony's weight, which perplexed her. How Pinkie had gotten there without Twilight noticing until she had spoken was also a mystery. Twilight instinctively buckled her hindquarters into the air, and Pinkie did a high twirling somersault from her momentum, landing on her forehooves, smiling upside down at her band. Immediately, the 4 other mares started to clap their hooves against the polished linen floor, flipping and cheering. Spike clapped his claws along with them. All 5 wore broad, happy smiles on their faces.
Woohoo!
Nice sailing there, Plank! Applejack called.
Yeah! Sweet moves there!
Cheered Rainbow Dash.
Wow, that was amazing,
said Fluttershy.
Very dazzling spectacle, Pinkie Pie,
praised Rarity.
That was amazing, Pinkie!
Spike shouted gleefully. Pinkie started to laugh with joy at the praise that her friends shouted her for her launched move, rolling up into a ball on the floor. The laughter spread to Spike, Rarity, Applejack, Fluttershy, and Rainbow Dash.
Twilight watched the 6 others laughing, with an odd, creeping feeling in her chest. She wanted to join in, but she did not want to lose herself in the herd. But she started to laugh anyway. It started out low and small, but quickly rose and became a high, bell-like sound that rang out alongside the 6 other laughs in the library. It fit right in. If anything, it made the rest of their laughter sound much more melodious, bringing them all together. The laughter also did something Twilight could not have anticipated. The fear and burden of taking down Nightmare Moon was already beginning to overwhelm her, to make her curl up into a neurotic little ball and ruminate on all the worst-case scenarios. Now, Twilight felt all those worries and fears evaporate away, leaving only the goal ahead, as clear as the sunrise. She feared that she would let the goal itself pass out of her mind in a lackadaisical apathy brought on by the smell of laughter. But that was not the case at all. Pinkie, herself off the ground, had seen it laugh so hard she fell into her barrel. Twilight looked around and saw the 6 others, similarly, pulling themselves to their hooves, or in Spike's case, claws.
Let's hear a round of applause for Twilight here, Pinkie called out, because I wouldn't have been able to do that half-double, half-twist, hold the audience face for a bit, somersault without her.
Before Twilight could dissuade them, the others had already started to stomp their hooves, or clap their claws in Spike's case, and whoop and cheer for Twilight herself. In that moment, Pinkie Pie smiled brightly at the lavender unicorn, and their eyes met. Twilight saw in those swirly irises and bright pupils a pure, unbridled joy at being around to brighten up any pony's lives. And she realized. "I'm sorry, Pinkie," Twilight said slowly, but cheerily. "I didn't know you were just so—"
So what, Twilight?
Pinkie asked, with a tilted head and wide smile. "Crazy," Rainbow Dash suggested.
Unrestrained,
Rarity added. "Outspoken," Applejack queried.
forward,
Fluttershy wondered. "Fun?" Spike asked.
so happy.
Twilight nervously ran a cloven hoof along her other foreleg, one of her ears drooping slightly. "You just love seeing every pony smile, and you try to share their happiness with every pony around you. You put so much time into planning parties just to see them smile. You don't even ask for any money payment, do you?"
What? No!
Pinkie actually looked affronted.
I don't take their money. That would just make them sad.
"My point exactly," Twilight indicated brightly. "Bringing happiness and joy to ponies isn't a means to an end for you at all. Their happiness is an end in and of itself. You help ponies to laugh and smile, and that's—" Twilight couldn't help it. She wiped away a tear. "That's just so beautiful. I love to call you my friend." Pinkie beamed brightly, her mane and tail frizzing all about on its own. She seemed to be fluttering very quickly as her grin widened more and more. Twilight took a step back from Pinkie. The pink earth pony had shown herself capable of a good number of equine feats. Who knew what would happen now that she was so... Twilight's field of vision became filled with infinite fuzzy pinkiness, and her barrel became enwrapped by at least a dozen fuzzy rubbery limbs. Breathing was difficult. At least 2 of her ribs had to have cracked.
Oh, Twilight, thank you.
Pinkie squealed, pulling back so she could meet Twilight eye to eye. Even though Twilight could see Pinkie's forelegs free from the hug, it still felt like at least 10 forelegs were wrapped around her.
I always love it when ponies want to be my friends.
Twilight chuckled nervously. "Yeah, that's great, Pinkie Pie, but
Do you think you could let me go now?
Pinkie became confused.
Wait, but didn't I already let you go?
Blinking, Twilight realized she no longer felt those other limbs wrapping themselves around her. Looking at Spike and the other 4 mares, she only received shrugs as answers to this little episode. "Pinkie," Twilight began, "do you think you could explain why it felt like I was being hugged by 6 ponies at once just now?" Pinkie began to giggle, hoof to her mouth.
I could.
Gritting her teeth in frustration and Pinkie's light-facedness, Twilight took a deep breath and prepared to shout.
Twilight!
Applejack shouted. Twilight rounded on the Earth Pony, snapping, "What is it, Applejack?" Applejack pointed to the saddlebags, piled in the corner. "I'll see some blue lights over among the saddlebags." All thought of Pinkie's odd hugs aside, Twilight, Spike, and the 5 mares bolted to the piles of saddlebags, looking for the source of the lights Applejack had seen. "Here!" Twilight said, as her Dwemer shiver held aloft a bright pink set of saddlebags, decorated with yellow and blue balloons. Blue light was coming from under the loose flaps on top. Breath caught in the 7 chest. "Another element's been activated?" Spike gasped. "But how?" asked Twilight, opening up the saddlebag flaps and looking down at the glowing blue shards of stone. Pinkie started to bounce gaily around Twilight, her eyes closed in mirth.
"I bet it's 'cause you learned a lesson in friendship not being about super serious business all the time, and you realize you need to have a little laughter every lap around the racetrack so that you don't lose your marbles because being super serious business all the time."
Twilight palmed her face in the hoof at the smile Pinkie offered her. "Pinkie, this isn't some little fantasy novel! You've got to get your head into the real world!"
Your world? But I don't feel like going to the movies today, Twilight. I don't even think newsreel's been updated for the whole nighttime eternal dealio by Huggy Smokes up there.
Twilight stammered a few times, trying to wrap her mind around what Pinkie Pie was telling her, trying to construct some sort of retort to what the insane Earth Pony was telling her. "Twilight," grumbled Applejack, out of gritted teeth, sidling up to the lavender unicorn. "Remember that there lesson of friendship?" Twilight cocked her eyes at the Ponyville Earth Pony, before glancing back at Pinkie, who was smiling innocently and wildly at Twilight. The juxtaposition of Pinkie's mix-up of real and real suddenly hit Twilight like a runway contessa, as he let out a loud snort that could have gotten several Canterlot elites turning up their noses at her. The snort became a laugh, and soon Pinkie was laughing, and Spike, and the others. For the second time in so many minutes, the Golden Oak Library, which was supposed to be quiet, was privy to the laughter of 6 mares and 1 drake. Twilight wiped a tear of joy. "Well, that's one more element down. Hopefully, Queen Celestia's hidden message in the studies on Ponyville culture will elucidate their activation process for us." The farewell to Ponyville was very akin to the last time they left, only with more ponies present. Virtually every pony in Ponyville was seeing them off this time around, and Scootaloo had not been asleep to see Rainbow dash off. "Keep practicing those sweet moves, kid, and be safe as long as I'm away," Rainbow Dash said, holding Scootaloo tight to her chest with one foreleg, and giving her a nookie with the other. The little orange Pegasus filly flailed little hose around, trying to reach Rainbow Dash's nookie-applying hoof.
"I will if you'll let me go, Dash!"
Pinkie Pie was giving Mr. and Mrs. Cake big hugs and little coochie-coos to Mrs. Cake's pronounced belly, bidding farewell to her other little siblings. Fluttershy was, reluctantly, leaving Angel Bunny in the hose of Stellar Eclipse once more. The wheelchair-bound stallion was more confident in his stride this time around, but was still sharing a wary gaze with the reluctant little bunny rabbit. Applejack was trading heartfelt "see you laters" with her folks from Sweet Apple Acres, placing her Stetson over Apple Bloom's head, the wide brim falling over her little sister's eyes. Rarity's farewells to her family were rather more subdued for her part, but her family's exuberance more than made up for her reluctance. A very familiar agave and cactus had been brought forward from the gazebo, placed before Twilight and Spike. A teary smile crossed Twilight's muzzle, Spike mirroring her expression. "Mom, Fatty, your little girl is out finding friends," she said with a cracking voice. "Applejack is wonderful, always at my side. Rarity is one of the most generous ponies I could ever hope to meet. And Pinkie Pie, well, Pinkie makes me laugh." She knelt down and hugged the base of each parent's pot. "I love you two. I wish I could do more, but it's all I can do to water you two and hope the sun comes back again." Taking a watering can that had been presented from Town Hall as well, Twilight gave each of her parents a small dosage of water, before passing the watering can to Spike. Twilight looked up at Twilight with wide eyes, and Twilight smiled down at her ward.
You can water them too, Spike, she said softly. You never knew them, but I know they mean a lot to you.
Spike's eyes quivered, and he gave a quivering smile and nod as tears flowed with renewed fever down his cheeks. With shaky claws, he tipped the watering can over the plants that he saw as his grandparents. As she watched Spike watering her parents, there was just something wholesome and right about Spike calling them family, and by extension, her. But, Twilight thought, calling him son seemed to be a step too far. Sure, she seemed cold and close-minded looking back, and Spike was very dear to her, but... As Twilight turned and addressed the ponies of Ponyville, shallow farewells mixed amid genuine blessings of good fortune. She wondered what would lie ahead for her friends and companions in this journey to the northernmost edge of Equestria. There would be trouble, sure. There would be encounters with the saddleboats, doubtless, and creatures emboldened by about a week's nighttime. Chimericals would be more active in their search for pony prey, as would merewolves and vampires. Equestria would be a much more dangerous place, particularly in the frontiers that were underexplored and unsettled. But she had friends to back her up, and she was sure to be helped to keep Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy safe as well. Fluttershy was almost friend material, but seemed exceptionally timid and soft-spoken. Rainbow Dash was about the exact opposite. Outspoken, brash, and blunt. One was exceedingly introverted, the other immensely extroverted. At least you could trust Rainbow Dash to speak her mind. And when we return, we will have all 6 elements of harmony ready to take down Nightmare Moon once and for all! Twilight finished. The reaction of the pony villagers was a rather rousing, but also somewhat subdued chorus of cheers. Perhaps they'd been jaded to Twilight's declaration only a few days prior? Or maybe they were becoming used to her ability to save lives after that Ursa Major incident. Twilight shook her head mentally. Of course it wasn't either of those. The extended nighttime was wearing down their spirits in spite of Twilight's heliogenous sun and the Wonderbolt's sunbolts. Twilight could feel it herself, a persuasive weariness from a lack of vitality that natural sunlight gave to every pony. When we crack the code that Queen Celestia has left us, Twilight continued, raising her voice to reacquire any flagging attention, I'll raise the sun for a few moments, just as a signal to you, and to Nightmare Moon, that we won't go quietly! Hasty, anticipatory murmurs broke out in the herd of pony villagers.
Yo, Twilight,
hissed Rainbow Dash.
you really got chutzpah if you're going to do that, but you think you got the power to back it up?
I don't know, replied Twilight, but I've seen the Queen do it so many times in our early morning study sessions. I should be able to get a grip on the sun for a few moments.
You can do that?
Asked Applejack. I can imitate any unicorn magic after seeing it just once,
Twilight explained. And that is why Twilight is awesome. Numerous ears perked up, which had caught wind of Twilight's statement, and every pony within earshot of Twilight's statement goggled their eyes at her. It honestly made Twilight feel very uncomfortable.
What? So, you could imitate my magic for finding gemstones?
Verity asked.
Well, I suppose. Or, perhaps, more to the point, Trixie's illusion magic?
Twilight froze.
She had not thought of that.
Though she did see the Ursa Major, produced by Trixie's illusionary spell work, she did not reckon for it thermological smoke and mirror magic afterwards. Maybe, just maybe, knowing the basic theory of how Trixie had done it.
I might be able to,
Twilight admitted.
And you know what?
What? Twilight grinned.
I think I might have figured out how we're going to get into the Crystal Mountains if the Nightmare Guard has secured it.
With the quick final farewells and mutual well wishes, the band of 7 departed from Ponyville. The first day was full of energy and vigor as the band made their journey westward. A canter of 10 miles per hour, or a mile every 6 minutes, was a reasonable speed for any pony to canter at if she wanted to get somewhere briskly. The destination, however, was nowhere near their departure point. The Crystal Mountains lay nearly 24 gross miles northwards from Canterlot, a distant journey even for seasoned travelers. Various means of travel allow for equestrians and foreigners to reach various corners of the kingdom with ease, but not necessarily with speed. Caravans hauled by earth ponies can hold a family up to 6 ponies and travel 5 gross miles in a single day, provided that relay stations switch out for a second band of ponies to pull the carrots. Pegasus caravans, partly constructed of clouds and evaporate to lighten its load, provide an aerial view of Equestria as they are drawn by Pegasi across the country at an average of 2 gross miles a day, providing for relay stations. Unicorns have devised the Narabaticus system, a series of quantum thermometric tunnels, portals in lay ponies' terms, based off the feeding patterns of the Narabaticus beast, which created similar portals to fling prey into its gaping maw. None of these means of travel would be advisable to reach Crystal Mountains. The relay stations into and out of Saddle Valley were likely out of service as the mares and stallions, who ordinarily service said stations, returned to their hometowns to care for family, or maintain other, more traveled relay stations. "I don't know the Narbacular tunnel spell," Twilight lamented, "and I don't know if I have the authorization to open a Narbacular tunnel even if I did." "Authorization?" Verity asked, and Spike made goo-goo eyes at her. "The thermometrists in charge of the Narbacular system keep a tight watch on the network of Narbacular tunnels around Equestria, to ensure that ponies do not abuse them for illegal purposes. What we're doing, breaking into and out of the Crystal Mountains, is technically illegal." "But we're doing it under the authority of Celestia," complained Rainbow Dash. "Isn't that good enough?" "Not under Nightmare Moon," Twilight answered ominously. "I'm honestly surprised that we made it out of Canterlot alive for all the hate she must feel for the Queen." At that moment, Rainbow Dash sunk to the ground, resting on her rump as she folded into her forelegs. Then she beamed. "We could hitch a ride on Pegasus caravans for Cloudsdale." "Begging your pardon, Rainbow Dash," Applejack had cut in, "but ain't Cloudsdale, well, in the sky?" Rainbow replied with a slight smirk. "Not quite, Applesnack. You see, not every pony in Cloudsdale is a Pegasus, though there's land-based cottages and stuff on the ground under the Cloud City. Fluttershy here grew up in one of them and everything." Fluttershy nodded slightly, mightily flushed at having attention brought to her so suddenly.
"My mother Posy was an earth pony."
"I don't think that'll work either." Twilight shook her head.
"What? But Twilight!"
Rarity began. "Think about it, Rarity. Nightmare Moon has almost half of the Royal Guard under her mind control, and I don't think she'll stop at that. She'll try to cow the police forces of so many cities, towns, and villages into her control. Hypnosis or not, she'll be keeping an eye on every pony, everywhere. If we're flying in a carriage across the sky pulled by Pegasi, how do we know that hypnotized Pegasi or bat ponies won't try to bring us down?" "Or perhaps some of the Pegasi pulling them might be mind-controlled," Applejack added. Twilight nodded at the Polemo Earth Pony with a faint smile. "Maybe." Rarity looked mournfully at her hooves and horseshoes, already starting to lose some of the manicure and luster she prided herself on so much. She took in a deep breath, eyes clenched shut.
"I will accept this burden, Twilight. I will shoulder every crack of my hooves, in the hopes that it will be all worth it when the sun shines upon Equestria once more."
Spike almost swooned. "She's just so perfect!" Twilight rolled her eyes at Spike's infatuation. The rim of the Everfree Forest shrunk into the horizon as the western edge of the North Equus Mountains came into view at the end of the second day. The path they followed was rugged, as they traveled alongside the road rather than directly on it. As Twilight explained, to varying degrees of acceptance, following the road as opposed to cantering down on it put them in a safer position, as Nightmare Moon's agents will look down directly upon the road.
"If we stay off the beaten path, they shouldn't take notice of us,"
Twilight had explained. But we should keep still out of sight, from the road, and be wary of any pony we see walking down from the road. If we let any pony see us, the Nightmare Moon could wheedle that information out of her or him under threat of death. If we're careful, all we have to worry about are the odd wild animal, along with werewolves, vampires, or even the odd Hema-Lope. Hopefully, we won't meet such misfortune. Their journey to the edge of Saddle Valley, where the North Equestria Mountains shrunk into easily escapable hills, was relatively lacking in danger. There had been some treacherous moments when they passed a little too close to a cockatrice's nest, and had to run away with their eyes slammed shut to avoid being petrified. Thankfully, Applejack had a profound sixth sense for the earth beneath them, and was able to tell every pony exactly where to run, so they would encounter the least resistance from the ground. To her credit, every pony followed her lead without question or hesitance. Her prowess as an earth pony gave her a lot of clout with her fellow pony villagers, and Twilight had come to trust Applejack's input on any given situation, however harrowing. A cave of Equestria had also been happened upon, but thankfully, the investigation inhabiting that particular cave had all been asleep.
Equestria sleeping at night is very unusual,
Fireside commented.
Their sleep cycle must be off. The poor babies.
I know, Twilight murmured in agreement. Poor babies! Good riddance, I say! Rainbow Dash blurted out. I'm just glad they're not awake to eat us! Twilight hastily shushed Rainbow, clamping a hoof over the brass Pegasus' muzzle. A sleepy hoot rumbled from within the cave, and each of the seven went stock still. Any moment, an Ursarex, owlbear, would lumber out of the cave, spot the band of ponies which would have disturbed its rest, and lay them out for its hatchling cubs' dinner. But the growling gave way to hooting snores, and the mares and Drake relaxed. Twilight engulfed Rainbow in her glimmer shimmer, shaking the Pegasus slightly. You bird brain! Twilight soared. Why the Ursarex woke up? What would you have done? Fly away and abandon your friends? We should be thankful for small miracles, like an investigation of Ursarex is being asleep at night. Besides, you can't carry all 6 elements of harmony on your own! I'm sorry, all right? Rainbow Dash said wearily, her eyes squinting slightly because of the shaking. I just blurt things out sometimes! Well, you're going to have to get that under control before it gets some pony killed! Her glimmer shimmer faded abruptly, and Rainbow Dash, still woozy from being shook around for shouting, weaved into the ground muzzle first. Pinkie Pie let out a windy giggle, and Rainbow's rump sticking straight in the air.
Full moon dashing!
She trilled. Rainbow Dash gave her a miserly, sour look. The Ursarex in that cave may not have attacked them, giving Pinkie cause to spread laughter of relief at their escape. However, she found it going a little more tense with her fellow Ponyville prankster, giving her the stink eye for at least a day after that little crack. By the time they reached the edge of the North Equestria Mountains on the 21st of Solace, though, Rainbow Dash had begun beaming as though the sun were shining on her own face. Looking out below the whole hills at the lowest point of the North Equestria Mountains, she saw the wide expanse of plains stretching for miles beyond. The distant cloud construct of Cloudsail glimmered under the moon. And for those of you who are listening, I'm going to put a picture of an Ursarex down in the description below. But short version, an Ursarex is a giant bird-like creature, and they are scary. The wide plains of Earth, Twilight gasped in awe, where the Earth ponies first discovered Equestria. 24 gross miles north to south, and over 36 gross miles east to west. The largest single expanse of plains on all of Harmonia laid out before them. As far as they could see, the land was almost perfectly flat under the starlit sky. The road beside them stretched out into wide plains like an arrow, pointing the way toward the nearest settlement to the north. It's been a dog age since I've seen it.
It's so big.
Fireside breathed, shivering.
Well, what's every pony waiting for? Let's go!
Pinkie squealed, beginning to dart forward. Yeah! Cried out Rainbow Dash, who,
actually did bolt into the blue.
You get back here, Rainbow!
Shouted Applejack. No, let her go, Twilight said sharply. She'll tire herself out, and she'll realize that we need to stick together then. It's a tough lesson to learn, but a necessary one. As the Cyan Pegasus receded into a rainbow speck on the horizon, Twilight took into the night air. There were almost no sunbolts overhead in this region. The fact that there were a few, however, indicated to Twilight that the Wonderbolts perhaps did anticipate that the band would travel this way. Were they privy to Queen Celestia's plans as well? Shaking her head lightly, Twilight dismissed such thoughts. That was strict paranoia. The Wonderbolts were just an ace team of flyers with a strong military history. That didn't mean they necessarily had a close allegiance to Queen herself, right?
Well, what are we waiting for?
Pinkie said, bouncing back and forth impatiently from one hoof to another.
Let's go!
Well, I agree with Pinkie, Rarity said with a tip of a hoof. But perhaps we could proceed at a more leisurely pace than she? Twilight nodded. Yes, we'll catch up with her, but we'll pace ourselves. 10 miles per hour it is. Rarity's eyes widened, and her teeth clenched, but Twilight received nods of acceptance from the other three. Applejack's head bobbing was low and paced. Pinkie's was so fast it almost looked like she had 8 eyes, while Flutter's eyes was more like hanging her head in shame. Twilight still smirked, spell matrices lining up in her mind for a simple light spell. A ball of pink light appeared at the tip of her alicorn. All right, girls, let's go. The long canter to reach Raudas was longer than any of them would care to admit. At least 5 hours. 5 hours of unbroken, uninterrupted cantering at a near constant 10 miles per hour. Covering a mile in 6 minutes was not terribly difficult for any pony worth her salt. But covering 4 dozen in 2 miles in a 5-hour stretch without rest was a feat of endurance that would almost balk at. It helped that none of the band were traveling alone, though ponies had long since evolved to the level where they could be solitary if they chose. They still flourished most in a band or herd of fellow equines. Pinkie Pie's boundless energy and joking behavior, while ordinarily rather obnoxious and in your face, acted as sort of a one-pony cheering squad for the party.
Come on, everybody! I know I can do it! And I don't even need my pinky set to tell me that. I just know we're gonna make it to Dashi! Put some hustles into those haunches, Rarity! Well, just look at Jackie over there! She's just plodding along. She's not letting anything get to her. She's like a mountain. But let's not make her into a molehill, because she doesn't have any moles. She has pickles!
Twilight had to admit to herself. Pinkie's continual stream of conscious dialogue was probably what kept her going in this long canter. The pink earth ponies darting about amongst the other members of the band, including Spike, who decided to follow on all fours in the space between Twilight and Rarity, had kept every pony's spirits up as they marched forth into the chilly wide plains. They knew it could not be cold at this time of year. The month of Solace was nearly concluded, and Aster began on Sunday. The summer sun celebration, and the return of Nightmare Moon, was little over a week ago. The lack of proper sunshine, except the sunbolts, meant that the temperature throughout Equestria would plummet. Twilight could only hope that other ponies were knowledgeable of the healing Janus spell, or some other form of thermometry capable of warming body and soul. It turned out that Rainbow Dash had only made it about 4 dozen and 2 miles on her initial spurt before collapsing in apparent exhaustion. They found her curled up in a pass of dewy grass, snoring with grunting neighs. Her ears were flat against her head, and her expression was surly as she curled up against the growth of hooves distant from the road. Twilight, who was closest to the tuckered Pegasus, flicked her head slightly, her queued mane bouncing back against her neck. At the flick, the orb of light separated from her horn, dimming slightly as it hovered directly overhead. She turned to face Spike and the other 4 mares. All right, take 5, every pony. Spike? She added with a soft smile at her ward. Almost immediately, Rarity practically collapsed onto her barrel,
looking at her forehoofs in misery. "My poor hoosies!" she said in a high, rueful tone. "There's such wretched condition after just 4 dozen miles." "Get used to a bit of rough and tumble, Rare," Applejack said lowly. "The wilderness is real, wild."
"I never would have guessed,"
Rarity replied acidly.
Twilight arched an eyebrow at Fluttershy, who was poking her muzzle around the underside of one of her wings. "Aren't you tired, Fluttershy?" she asked the yellow Pegasus. "Why don't you take a rest?" Upon hearing Twilight address her, Fluttershy looked up sharply and frightfully at her addresser.
Oh, no. Should I be?
"Oh no, it's just you've been walking for quite a while."
Oh, well, this is not that bad. I mean, I spend a lot of time every day taking care of all the animals around Ponyville. I help keep the tunnels of Rabbit and Jackalope moorings from intersecting. I make sure every little birdie around town has enough seeds to feed their little birdie babies. I help Harry the Bear in out collecting every honey for Ponyville. I keep weekly tabs on new animals that move in from outside Ponyville.
Fluttershy trailed off. She saw that Twilight's eyes were glazing over at this.
Oh, I'm sorry, Twilight,
Fluttershy said softly.
I forgot that you are interested in animals.
No, Fluttershy! I don't want you to think that at all. I mean, I'm no zoologist, but you just seem to speak with animals at a whole other level from most other ponies. At once, a thought occurred to Twilight, and she gasped sharply. Immediately, every pony, and Spike, who was trying to console Rarity over her hooves, tried to face Twilight in alarm. Even Rainbow Dash woken up, rubbing her eyes. "Where's the fire, Twilight?" Applejack asked.
Fire? There's a fire?
Pinkie started to shout in panic.
There's a fire! Everybody in its cells!
"It was a figure of space, Pinks," Applejack drawled.
Twilight beamed at the band. "Guys, I just realized something. Fluttershy's a whisperer."
"Look-de friggin-do! Harmonia-shattering revelation there, egghead!" Rainbow Dash snarked.
"I've been able to tell you that she whispers at all times of the day."
Twilight's eyebrows lowered at the science Pegasus' dry remark, while Fluttershy covered her flushed face with her wings.
"What I mean is that Fluttershy is capable of understanding animals at a deeper level than any normal pony. Only one is born every 3 or so generations. They're really rare. I thought I'd meet one in Canterlot somewhere, and now, well, I meet one in Ponyville."
"You find all sorts down in Ponyville," grumbled Rainbow Dash,
clearly apathetic to Twilight's explanation.
Applejack replied by bucking a cloud of dirt onto the drowsy Pegasus' face. Rainbow Dash coughed. "What the hell was that for, AJ?" "That's what you get for charging off while leaving your partners in the dust," Applejack murmured.
Rainbow Dash's ears drooped again, rubbing her forelegs together.
"Yeah, sorry about that. I just saw all that open space. I mean, Ponyville's got plenty of open space around it, but there's nothing to this, and I just took off. It was real rotten of me, and I'm sorry."
Applejack gave the Pegasus a hesitant look, as had Twilight. Rainbow Dash did not exactly have a steady track record for sensitivity, but
being up front was one thing they knew her for, and Applejack smiled down at her. "Well, don't be making a habit out of this. I reckon we all gotta stick together."
Rainbow Dash chuckled shortly.
"Yeah, I'll try to slow down for you guys, even if it's just for Flutters."
Pinkie let out a tremendous laugh.
Dash is going slow? That's if I stopped laughing. Or Twilight burning books.
Twilight scowled at the possibility. Then the absurdity of hating a book so much she burned it on sight made her laugh.
It was not a big laugh, even she had to admit, but it definitely caught attention,
because it was Twilight Sparkle laughing.
"See? Even Twilight thinks it's funny."
Pinkie giggled.
Rarity put a hoof to her mouth, and stifled a giggle herself.
"I must admit, the idea is patently ridiculous. It's like Fluttershy screaming at the top of her lungs."
"Oh, my."
Fluttershy shuddered at the very thought.
"Why would I do something so frightful.
Or like you skipping a shower, rough and tumble outside? Applejack queried toward the alabaster unicorn.
Or you even taking a shower at all,
Rarity countered. Or like you not putting a ton of sequins on your dress just you cayenne?
Girls, I thought we dealt with this,
Twilight grumbled.
Or like you switching to pass.
Applejack opened her mouth to retort, but her fierce expression shattered as her muscles scruzzled up in amusement. After a moment, the dam broke as Applejack guffawed loudly, bringing a hoof to the ground. Oh, wow, Wares! I never took you for a mare of humor. Well, that was a real rib tickler. Applejack commented with a slight wheeze. Rarity looked up at nothing as she thought back on what she had just said, before a rather un-Rarity-like whinnying laugh bubbled up from her muzzle. For a moment, Twilight could definitely hear that she was her parents' filly. The moment passed, though, and Rarity's laugh became refined faster than one could say, wink out.
Now that I think back on it,
Rarity choked out between giggles.
that is quite an amusing image.
See what I mean?
Pinkie leapt in between Applejack and Rarity, forehoofs lipping around their necks and bringing them in closer, so that the three of them were practically muzzle to muzzle.
Call me Dr. Pie, because laughter is the best medicine.
Sort of thing, Dr. Pie, Applejack mumbled. Her muzzle was entirely too close to Rarity's, and Pinkie's, close enough to kiss. Now, could you kindly let us go?
Pinkie giggled. Your breath tickles my nose.
Before collapsing into a giggling fit on the grassy ground. Spike looked up at Twilight. She's insane!
I know,
Twilight said shortly.
but she means well, and Queen Celestia knows we're going to need some laughs along the way. Tell me about it, Twilight,
Rarity began.
I dare say that I sound likely lag behind the rest of you.
Despite Rarity's fears to the contrary, she did not fall behind. Indeed, she proved to be at a caliber of willpower surpassed only by Applejack and Twilight Sparkle. The notion of more days passing by, wherein the condition and quality of her hooves, mane, and tail would only deteriorate seemed to have lit a fire in her. For the first 2 days of northward marching, Rarity could be heard to press the band onward in the swatches of time between Pinkie Pie had silenced herself to actually concentrate on making forward progress. Truly, long canters could bring out the worst in some ponies.
First onward, if you please, girls! My quaffed mane will not remain quaffed forever. The less time it remains unquaffed, the better. My horseshoes are getting worn down more and more by the day. We must stop lagging on forward momentum, or I could be spending time unshod.
Don't you dare to tell me not to shave while concentrating, Twilight!
I am a fashionista. Multitasking is second nature to me.
Eventually, Twilight had to intervene, telling her in so many words she was being overbearing, and letting the stress of the situation get to her, telling her she needed to loosen up. Rarity caught an eyebrow at her fellow unicorn.
Surely you, of all ponies, understand the necessity of bringing this everlasting night to the end, to bring back your mentor and the sun.
Yes, I want it all back. I want it back worse than you could even imagine. The Queen was like a mother to me when I didn't... Twilight took a deep breath, ignoring the burning around her eyes. But this isn't just about you, Rarity. I thought you realized that. This isn't just some camping trip. This is saving Equestria. And we can't save it if we're letting ourselves get worked up over little things.
Twilight.
This isn't easy for any of us. Don't you think I'd rather be home reading books? Or that Applejack would rather be bucking apple trees? Or Fluttershy taking care of animals? Or Rainbow Dash doing... whatever it is that Rainbow Dash does? My point is, we all have to sacrifice something to change the world. Twilight looked deep into Rarity's eyes, their alicorns almost touching. Rarity's face became pensive and slightly somber.
Forgive me, Twilight. I let myself become overwhelmed by the pressure of not looking fabulous. I mean, as long as no pony here breathes a word to any pony else, my lips are sealed.
Rarity sighed deeply.
Thank you, Twilight. I start puzzling myself unduly about keeping up appearances.
She gritted her teeth. But I must still shave! 6 days and 6 gross miles after the group reached the edge of the North Equest Mountains, The third day of Astor came to pass. There had been surprisingly little to be concerned over, though the band would occasionally run astray at the odd rustle of some underbrush, as some small creature, like a hare or mole, scurried from one hole to another. The odd howl could be heard at times, chilling the band to the marrow. It was always far off, though how far off was difficult to gauge, was so little around for sound to echo off of. In the instances after the band heard the howls, they sped up their speed as one, without any need for verbal communication. Though Twilight was only vaguely aware of it, they were falling back on the ancestral herding instinct, each one of them subconsciously supplementing their individuality in order to ensure that most of them had survived. Once they were certain that the howls were far behind, however, they would return to their prior cantering speed, and their individual senses. With the North Equest Mountains now more than 6 gross miles behind them, and the most recent settlement some 5 gross miles behind, the band was completely surrounded on all sides by the wide plains as far as they could see. Stars twinkled over their heads, unencumbered by the nighttime lights of Ponyville and Canterlot. The moon had vanished completely from the sky above, and Twilight breathed a mild sigh of relief. The new moon, she said lightly. The lack of a new moon meant that any merewolves that may or may not be out in the wide plains would be in their normal pony form, and thus unlikely to attack. They were not quite in the clear, but Twilight felt it was somewhat safe to set down a light orb at grass level as a mock fire. With only starlight, it would be quite dim, and he would need some light to see by. Okay, every pony, we've made some excellent progress today. We'll rest here for tonight. Twilight set her saddlebags upon the brighter ground with her Dwemer sharer. Spike, would you be so kind as to collect every pony's saddlebags? Of course, Twilight! Spike said, with a smiling salute, before trotting off to collect Rarity's saddlebag, even though she was furthest from him and Twilight. Applejack arched a pale eyebrow at Twilight. Your little guy's got all bad for Rarity, don't he? Looks like it. Twilight replied, as Spike placed Rarity's saddlebag delicately inside a ring of particularly tall grass. He then took it in turns, collecting everybody else's saddlebags, though not with the same eagerness as before. Hey, Spike! Rainbow Dash asked slyly, as the Drake took her saddlebag into his arms. Any particular reason you went and grabbed Rarity's first? Rainbow Dash! Rarity began testily. I do believe that Spike's business is his own. Yeah, Spike agreed. My business is my own. Feeling the situation turning against her, Rainbow Dash saved face by scoffing. Sure, okay, it's cool. Your secrets are yours to give or keep. I mean, it's not like I was prying or anything. Twilight narrowed her eyes at Rainbow's, was starting about nervously at that last statement. Seemingly satisfied with this response, Spike set about setting the last of the saddlebag on the ground by Rarity's, when a high, piercing shriek cut through the air. Each of the 7 rooted themselves to the spot on instinct, eyes darting about in every direction, searching for the source of the howl. Slowly, the 6 mares withdrew into a circle, keeping Spike inside the ring of their tails, standing watch for any sign of movement or rustle of grass. That doesn't sound good, Twilight hissed. What was that? Spike asked nervously. I have an idea, and once again, I hope I'm wrong. Ears pivoting about at the sounds of tearing grass, the band of mares turned as one toward the west, where a patch of tall grass was rustling increasingly violently. A dark shape with gleaming red eyes leapt out at them, and the group scattered, Spike leaping onto Twilight's back. Each of the 6 galloped or flew in a different direction, instinct overriding higher levels of thought. Turning around swiftly, Twilight lit up her Alicorn with a rosy light to get a better look at their attacker. It looked like a pony that was at least twice as large as Applejack, the largest of the 6 mares in their band. It was even more scarred as well, with a large chunk missing out of its right ear. Its muzzle was not equine in shape, but more canine, mouth bared to reveal razor teeth and fangs. Its forelegs did not end in hooves, but a lupine paws ending in sharp, silvery claws. Its hind hooves were cloven. Its mane was wilder and shaggier than any mane that any pony had ever seen, as was its bottle-brush tail, and its feathered back wings spread from its back. The beast's wide red eyes darted about madly at each of the 6 ponies, saliva dripping out of its mouth and leaving burn marks upon the barren earth. A low growl like the prisoners of Tartarus rumbled in its chest.
Werewolf?
Spike shuddered.
But it's a new moon.
Rainbow Dash noted fearfully.
That's not a werewolf.
Twilight gulped.
That's...
The beast howled to the sky with a shriek of death. And fog rose up as if from out of the earth itself.
A Hema-Lope,
Shuddered Fluttershy.
Stay close, every pony!
Called out Twilight, increasing the light of her glimmer shimmer, hoping to pierce the fog that obscured her vision. A black panic gripped her heart as she took a step forward, then another. This was her first encounter with a wild Hema-Lope. Some had been brought in, sedated, for the study of their emergence back at Canterlot, and Twilight Sparkle had been privy to summon her own assistance to the Queen. Despite being a werewolf that had been exposed to vampiric toxins, it carried none of the sapience of the pony race anymore. At least with a vampire, one could bargain one's safety if one offered some other source of blood forward, like a blood bank. Any pony who became a Hema-Lope was a beast, incapable of reasoning or negotiating with. All it wanted was blood. A large shape appeared ahead of Twilight, as he involuntarily powered up a Dwimmer beam. "Twilight! Simmer down!" Applejack strode forward, looking immensely fearful. "It's only me." Sweet relief flooded into Twilight's chest, releasing her heart from that panic-stricken grip.
Thank the Maker, Applejack. You nearly scared the cutie mark off of me. Where are the others?
"Up here!" Rainbow Dash waved from above the pair of ponies.
I'm here too.
Fluttershy whimpered, appearing at Applejack's right.
Also I.
Rarity trotted up and appeared at Applejack's left.
Where did the Hema-Lope go?
Pinkie asked, as she popped up in the middle of the band.
I've read about these creatures and their habits,
Twilight said ominously and quickly.
A Hema-Lope's got the same weather powers as a vampire, and since the first vampire, Shizkabob, was a Pegasus cursed by a nightmare moon, it's trying to intimidate us.
Twilight's pupils shrank, and her heart stopped.
Lure us all together, and...
A piercing screech split the fog, and a bat, almost as large as Applejack, swooped in from behind Twilight. In an instant, the Polemo Earth Pony leapt up and tackled the transformed Hema-Lope to the ground, bucking its sides as it landed. Bucking it was a bad idea. Individually, a vampire and a werewolf had enhanced resilience to bodily damage. This resilience was only bolstered by the combination of vampire and werewolf and Hema-Lope, and the end result was Applejack clutching her hind leg between her forehooves and cursing in pain. Behind her, the bat-shaped Hema-Lope opened its jaws impossibly wide, yellow fangs glinting in the starlight. "Leave her alone!" bellowed Rainbow Dash, bolting up to it and delivering a double buck to its head. Striking its head instead of its torso proved more decisive, as the Hema-Lope withdrew, nursing its jaw awkwardly with one of its wings. Rainbow Dash growled triumphantly at it, baring her own atavistic fangs as she flapped her wings defiantly at it. The Hema-Lope's eyes narrowed hatefully at the Cyan Pegasus, a pale, wavering light like the moon shimmering across its body. And soon, the Hema-Lope's lupine form hulked over them, roaring with such a force that a twister blew the 6 mares and one drake backwards, blasting the fog away. Fluttershy wearily got to her hooves, her legs shaking underneath her as after having cantered a gross miles, admittedly flying some of the way as well when her legs got tired. Behind her, her friends were groaning in weariness and pain. She looked back and was stricken by how prone they were. Rainbow Dash, Rarity, Pinkie, Applejack, Twilight, and Spike We're all lying, broken, hurt, and maybe even dying because of something, and Fluttershy snapped. Because of... She faced the advancing Hema-Lope, furious. Because of...
How dare you!
She said lowly. The Hema-Lope did not falter.
How dare you!
Fluttershy snarled, her friends behind her gaping in disbelief at the sight. What was especially astonishing was the fact that the Hema-Lope seemed to have halted its advance, its eyes widening at Fluttershy as he advanced toward it.
Just who do you think you are?
Fluttershy snapped at the Hema-Lope, which actually withdrew as if struck, even though it could have easily broken Fluttershy in two. It let out a low growl and started turning its head up towards the ponies behind her.
Look at me when I'm talking to you!
Fluttershy yelled, flapping her wings to raise herself to its eye level. The Hema-Lope immediately complied, its teeth bared in fear. Twilight could almost swear she saw a queer, silent light dancing in Fluttershy's eyes as he continued her tirade.
Now listen here! Just because you're so big doesn't mean you can hurt or kill ponies that are smaller than you, like me. I'm terrified of vampires, werewolves, and heroes, and sometimes even my own shadow. But just because you have shark claws and blood-sucking fangs that turn into a big bat and blood fog, don't think that you can ever get away with hurting my friends or my Daisy!
Twilight gaped at what she was seeing. This was literally unimaginable half a month ago. Before she came to Ponyville, Twilight would never have thought that any pony could tame a Hema-Lope. Now here she was, in the dead middle of nowhere, at the mercy of a bloodthirsty Hema-Lope, which was being cowed by the most timid pony she had never, ever met.
Now, you leave my friends and my Daisy alone, and never let me catch you trying to eat any pony ever again! You got that?
As Fluttershy stared the Hema-Lope down, Twilight witnessed a wavering shimmer passing across the paralyzed beast. In the moment, a regular-sized Pegasus mare was huddled in front of them. Her mane, tail, and coat so mottled, dirty, and crossed with scars that it was impossible to guess what color she was, or even what her cutie mark was. Her ragged ears were flat, lips quivering around at the mouth of her fangs, as tears spilled down her face. Sorry, she croaked, and Twilight gasped. A Hema-Lope was supposed to be incapable of speech. I would just like to take a few minutes to say, Booyah! Go Flutters! Fluttershy, so awesome. She cured hemolism. I want you to take that down with you people. Fluttershy had fluttered to the ground, her stare still penetrating the Hema-Lope's eyes.
Now go!
She barked, pointing off to the south. The Hema-Lope wasted no time before she lopped off in the exact direction Fluttershy had pointed as quickly as possible, disappearing into the brush. Fluttershy! That was amazing! Twilight bolted up to her hooves, almost ready to embrace the yellow Pegasus. When Fluttershy withdrew fearfully, though, Twilight refrained. Where did you learn to do that?
Do what?
The stare! Rainbow Dash cut in. I've known you forever, and you've never done that around me! Fluttershy rubbed a foreleg nervously.
I don't like to talk about it.
It did save our collective hives, darling, Rarity added. I would be remiss to withhold information on my gem-finding spell if it saved some pony's life.
Well, I guess it's something that I've had ever since I was just a filly. I don't really have control over it. But when I get angry at animals that won't listen to me, I just end up staring them down. I call it my stare.
Well, however it works, it saved all of our lives back there. Twilight smiled at Fluttershy. I've really underestimated you, Fluttershy. I didn't! Cut in Spike, who was swinging his arms around, claws curled into fists. That Hema-Lope thing was just swooping and swinging around, and then he just went, oh! He bugged his eyes out, with help from his claws, holding his eyelids open. And then it turned back into a pony and then ran off! That was awesome!
I'll sing!
Pinkie leapt in, almost muzzle to muzzle with the yellow Pegasus.
That was pretty worthy of a party!
But we don't have many party materials here, Twilight muttered.
Doesn't matter! Let's party anyway!
Get an ice box and seal down, Pinkie Pie, Applejack said coolly. What I'd like to know is exactly how this stair thing works. You and me both, Applejack, Twilight replied. But I think I have a hypothesis. None of us are sick, though, T.S., Rainbow Dash said confusedly. I said hypothesis, not hypodermic. None of us are cold either, Twilight. Not hypothermia either!
Girls, please!
Rarity cut in.
I do believe we should let Twilight speak. She is the most read of our band.
Thank you, Rarity. Twilight smiled. Anyway, as I was saying, my theory as to what the stair is this. Fluttershy, you said that your mother was an earth pony, right?
I did, yes.
Applejack, correct me if I'm wrong, but is one form of earth pony magic known as standing firm? I could back you up on that spell, Sugar Cube. To when the earth pony needs to stand her ground. Let her foe know that she ain't gonna buzz an inch for where she stands. Twilight nodded. Now, my theory. Perhaps Fluttershy's stare is a magic spell cast through her eyes, channeling the earth pony's standing firm magic in her blood. Many hosts scratched their chins at this suggestion. Some looked like they understood Twilight's suggestion better than others. Rainbow Dash seemed particularly lost.
I cannot quite wrap my head around it, but makes much sense as anything,
Rarity said lowly.
I suppose it makes sense,
Fluttershy added. Of course it does! Applejack beamed at Twilight. Oh boy, look at Pinkie Pie. She's an earth pony who can float and fly as well as any Pegasus. Sure enough, as he looked over, Pinkie was prancing gaily about, intermittently taking a big leap and galloping in midair to somehow stay longer, giggling and weeing all the while. Rainbow Dash snickered as he rested a wing on Fluttershy's shoulder. Looks like some pony up there's got a bit of Pegasus in their Pinkie Pie and a bit of earth pony in their Fluttershy.
I'm just glad that everybody's okay,
Fluttershy said, with a delicate smile and a faint blush.
You are all okay, right?
Play as a fiddle, Sugar Cube, Applejack replied. I feel like a mega gross bits, added Rainbow Dash, stretching her forelegs in the air. Tired as all get out, though. Well, it's a good thing we're going to rest here, Twilight said. I don't think anything's going to bother us here for now, since we apparently scared off a Hema-Lope. Ah! She gasped. The saddlebags! The elements! Miraculously, the saddlebags had been completely undisturbed by the Hema-Lope attack. Twilight sighed heavily as she shrank back down to her barrel in relief. Slowly, the mares around her followed suit, Spike settling to a spot in between Twilight and Rarity. Ein Vampiro fighty, Twilight thought to herself. Wer hätte gedacht, dass ein Pony ihren Vampire sehen konnte? Pinkie's giggling roused her from her thoughts. Twilight looked over at the earth pony, who was lying on her back, looking at the sky.
What's so funny, Pinkie?
Pinkie looked over at Twilight with a wide smile.
Oh, I just don't laugh at things that are funny, Twilight. I laugh when I'm happy, too. Want to know why I'm happy?
Humor us, Rainbow Dash cut in.
As a party pony, that's my job.
Pinkie giggled.
I'm happy because that mean old Hema-Lope is gone, and we're all okay. You gotta laugh when you're happy about something, and when you're sad, you gotta laugh to get the sadness out. You gotta laugh at the troubles of the world and make them smaller. Laugh at the Tartarus! That's what Granny Pie taught me.
You already told us this, Planks, Applejack drawled. But there's no reason why we don't need a reminder after that scare. Pinkie giggled in response, and pretty soon Rainbow Dash started to chuckle. Applejack joined in, and pretty soon all 7 of them were laughing at the closing darkness, relieved that everything had turned out all right. After a moment of laughter, the band sighed, laid back, and looked up at the twinkling star-filled sky.
The night is rather beautiful, Rarity breathed. I don't think I've ever appreciated it quite so much before. Get used to the sight, Rarity, Twilight said darkly, because we're going to be seeing this all day, every day, until we defeated Nightmare Moon. I'll take the first watch tonight, Sir Cube, Applejack said, rising to her hose and beginning to patrol the perimeter. Opal! No! The next morning, they had awoken to Rarity's screams of terror. The alabaster unicorn flailing her forelegs in the air in a panic as he scrambled to her hooves. Applejack gave a start. They must not have slept for very long, as he was still on first watch. Rarity! Twilight bolted from her sleeping spot to Rarity's side, attempting to put a foreleg around the alabaster unicorn to calm her down. Twilight! Where's Opal? Rarity asked raggedly, her mascara running. Twilight gave Rarity a confused but sympathetic look. She's back home in Ponyville, being cared for by your family. Rarity gave Twilight a shuddering look, before letting out a shaky sigh. Thanks, Celestia, it was just a dream, she said with a relieved smile, wiping away her tears and ruining makeup. What tarnation was that all about? Applejack queried, now that Rarity seemed to have calmed down. Rarity shuddered again, her eyes widening slightly. It was a nightmare, but worse, more real than any I've ever had. I dreamt that my cat, Opalescence, had run out into the streets, on a wagon. It just so happened quickly. Tears flowed down her muzzle once more, as her face fell into her forehoofs. My little kitty cat was cut round right in front of me. Every one of the 6 around Rarity gave her a sympathetic look, particularly Applejack. Why, it's terrible, Applejack began. I'll call him imagine something like that happened to Winona. Or Angel Bunny. Or Gummy. Or Spike. The words were out of Twilight's mouth before she could stop herself. Spike looked up at her with a mildly hurt look. Twilight, am I just a pet to you? He asked, his eyes shimmering as his lips quivered. What? No, Spike! I didn't mean that like it at all! Then, how did you mean it? Twilight wrapped a foreleg around Spike, and his arms wrapped around her chest and barrel. Tears slipped down onto her muzzle as she realized just how much she had taken Spike for granted, how much she had accepted it that he would clean up after all her messes, how much Spike really meant to her. Spike, you're more than my number one assistant. You're family to me. You've been there for me when no pony else was. And I've never been there for you when you really needed me. I promise you that I'll change that now. She smiled down at her little Drake. I won't say that I'll be your mom, but I won't stop you from calling me that anymore. I promise I'll look out for you better. I don't want you to ever feel like a tool ever again. Spike's claws clenched into fist, his mouth hanging open as tears slid down his scaly face. Mom, you... He jumped up, threw his arms around her neck. Mommy! You really do care! Twilight nuzzled him. I never stopped caring, Spike. It just took me this long to realize how much I did. Applejack rubbed the top of her head subconsciously, eyes misting up. Verity smiled at the scene, bumping away a tear from one eye with one cloven toe. Fluttershy's eyes shimmered as she, too, smiled at Twilight and Spike's bonding. Pinkie, for her part, was sobbing incoherently, veritable mountains of tears forming a puddle at her hooves. Rainbow Dash looked away from the scene, trying to maintain a cool smirk and hide whatever tears she may have been showing. I really do love you, Spike, Twilight muttered into one of his ear spines. You've been so close to me all this time, and I never realized how close I was. Mom, Spike croaked with a deep smile. This is really touching and all that, Rainbow Dash cut in. But what the heck was that nightmare all about? I barely got any sleep! Rainbow Dash! Twilight scolded. Think of Rarity's feelings. Do you really think she wants to think about that nightmare more?
No, Twilight, it's all right.
Rarity interjected.
Rainbow Dash has a point. I've never had a nightmare like that before. So real, so dreadful. You don't think it was planted by Nightmare Moon as a deterrent to our party?
Twilight's heart turned to ice.
Now that you mention it,
that could be within Nightmare Moon's power.
Maybe she's plotting to plant nightmares in our heads so we can't get any sleep. So that way she'll be able to take us down in a sleep-deprived state.
It wouldn't surprise me at any rate.
Plus, her name is Nightmare Moon,
Pinkie added. Fluttershy cut in.
Wouldn't that mean that Nightmare Moon knows where we are?
Twilight's heart jumped into her throat.
That's right. No magic spell can be cast on some pony unless you know where they are.
We've been too careless, setting up light spells every time we stop and go.
I'm sorry to say this, every pony,
but we're going to need to stick close together, because I'm dousing the light until we reach the Crystal Mountains. Any protestations held by the group were assuaged when they realized that Nightmare Moon would be less capable of tracking them without light. It was agreed that Nightmare Moon would reasonably guess where they were heading toward. So the band decided to pick up the pace and attempt to outpace the new government at Endymion for sending word to the Crystal Mountains.
To be fair, their journey was not precisely north, but slightly to the northeast as well.
Twilight knew that the entrance to the Crystal Mountains was not directly in direct northward line from the western ends of the North-Equest Mountains, nor was it directly north of Canterlot. It was actually within that one gross 9 dozen and 9 mile stretch between the two. And Twilight knew exactly where along that stretch was. Queen Celestia had been privy to her about it, keeping it a closely guarded secret that only the most high-up members of the Royal Guard were privy to. With any luck, they were not under her mind control, meaning they would not easily crack. It was now the 15th day of Astur, 1 month to the day since the Summer Sun celebration. 2 weeks had passed since the encounter with the Hema-Lope, and almost a dozen gross miles were behind the band from that spot. Their horseshoes had long since been worn out and discarded off the road, leaving just their bare hooves against the earth and grass. Pinkie Pie kept a high spirit about this, saying that it was
like in the good old days
before ponies had invented hoofwear. Despite the loss of their shoes, they dared not stop in a town to resupply, for fear that word would spread to where Endymion's most wanted were located, and where they were headed. To Twilight's immense surprise, and slight disconcertion, they encountered little resistance from many other threats after the Hema-Lope. There had been an altercation just 4 days later, when they found what seemed to be a tree in the middle of nowhere. When Fluttershy started to sing to it in hopes of some birds flying down to retrieve berries, it turned out to be a Trent, which rounded on them and started to attack. A swift buck from Applejack and a good minute of galloping put the Trent behind them. Other threats they managed to avoid included the odd Udroot attempting to lure away tired ponies, a flight of sturds, and a migrating flock of basilisks. A good leap was needed out of each of the band to clear the eastward path of toxins that the basilisks left behind in their wake. Through it all, Pinkie Pie's spirits never flagged, as he always had a joke to lighten any moment of terror or tension. Applejack had to admit, she never would have made it alone, even if Pinkie did not take this endeavor entirely seriously. Her levity was invaluable to this venture. It was as the old saying went, "A little nonsense here and there is relished by the wisest mare." Twilight slowed her canter to a trot, and Applejack behind her followed suit, as if Fluttershy and Pinkie Pie behind her, Rarity and Rainbow Dash. Spike jumped down Twilight's back. "What's wrong, Mom?"
"Spike, collect every pony's saddlebags. We're resting here for a while."
"But
it's not even been 6 hours of march, Sister Twilight."
Applejack pounded aloud, as Spike strode past her to collect Rarity's saddlebag.
"That's because I have a strong feeling that those sparkling lights ahead of us aren't stars anymore,"
she said, as she lit up her Alicorn, creating an orb of pink light on the top. They were trotting upon a dirt road, which took a moment to be registered by the band's 6 mares.
They were walking on a road, which meant they were near to some sort of settlement. The band had passed a good number of towns, hamlets, and farms as they made their 24 gross-mile trek across the wide plains towards the Crystal Mountains, always taking care to extend the nightly journey, or cut it short if it meant passing within eyeshot or earshot of any pony outside their band. The fact that they had been careless enough to cross the road meant, "We're getting mighty careless to take the road, Twilight," Applejack said warily. A Spike took her saddlebag and set it beside Twilight's and Rarity's.
Actually, that's not what I'm talking about, replied Twilight. We'll need our rest here now because, look! Risking a little more light, Twilight's horn began to shine like a beacon as she set a determined look ahead of her. Applejack narrowed her eyebrows slightly against the light as she looked at the sparkling expanse directly to her north. Fluttershy's eyes passed it over in awe, her slight jaw closing in on itself. Pinkie's eyes almost popped out of her head at the sight ahead. Rarity involuntarily smiled at the glimmering sparkles, and Rainbow Dash, smirking at Spike and was making a funny gaping face to the north, found herself being smacked by Rarity's leonine tail.
What?
Look!
Rarity said giddily, dancing almost about her hose. Rainbow Dash looked forward surly, before her own jaw dropped, and her eyes expanded to the size of dinner plates. They weren't looking at stars. They were looking at an expansive, rocky ridge that fairly studied across the facade with star-bright gemstones of every color and shape. It loomed over them, seeming all the more massive after the flat plains they had been accustomed to for the past 3 weeks, even though it had not been higher than the North Equus Mountains at all. They had done it. They had reached the Crystal Mountains.